On February 7th, 2015, a routine drive along California's Pacific Coast Highway turned deadly. A chain reaction crash involving multiple vehicles would leave one woman dead, several others injured, and one of the most famous public figures in America at the center of a national controversy. Over the years, the incident has often been described online as the Caitlyn Jenner hit and run, but that phrase tells only part of the story, and in some ways, it tells it wrong. This video breaks down exactly what happened, minute by minute, what investigators concluded, why prosecutors declined criminal charges, and why the case remains controversial to this day. In early 2015, Caitlyn Jenner was still publicly known as Bruce Jenner, an Olympic gold medalist, television personality, and member of the Kardashian-Jenner family. Just months later, Jenner would announce her gender transformation, becoming one of the most visible transgender figures in the world. But at the time of the crash, that transition had not yet been made public. This matters because the incident occurred just before Jenner became the focus of global media attention, meaning the crash would later be re-examined through an entirely different cultural lens. Saturday, February 7th, 2015. It was the early afternoon in Malibu, California. Traffic was heavy along the Pacific Coast Highway, a scenic but dangerous stretch of road known for sudden stops, tight lanes, and fast-moving vehicles. Caitlyn Jenner was driving a Cadillac Escalade, towing a recreational off-road vehicle on a trailer, a setup that significantly increased stopping distance. Four vehicles would ultimately become involved in the fatal sequence: a Toyota Prius driven by Jessica Standorf, a white Lexus sedan driven by 69-year-old Kimberly Howie, Caitlyn Jenner's Cadillac Escalade, and a Hummer SUV traveling in oncoming traffic. At some point, the Prius slowed or stopped unexpectedly. The Lexus behind it struck the Prius. Seconds later, Jenner's Escalade rear-ended the Lexus, pushing it sideways across the median and into oncoming traffic. The Lexus was then struck head-on by the Hummer. Kimberly Howie never stood a chance. The impact with oncoming traffic was catastrophic. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Multiple other drivers were injured, some seriously though, none fatally. Jenner exited her vehicle and remained at the scene. Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies arrived quickly. They separated witnesses, secured the scene, and began what would become a months-long collision investigation. Jenner cooperated fully. She was not arrested, not detained, and not suspected of intoxication. She took a field sobriety test, which she passed, and blood samples were taken voluntarily, which are standard procedure in fatal crashes. No drugs, no alcohol. This is where the case becomes complicated. Investigators determined that Caitlyn Jenner was not speeding, at least not in the terms of a posted speed limit. However, they concluded Jenner was traveling too fast for the conditions, especially while towing a heavy trailer. In California law, this distinction matters. You could be under the speed limit and still be legally at fault. The Escalade's stopping distance, combined with traffic conditions, meant Jenner was unable to brake in time. Despite how it's often labeled online, this was not a hit and run. Jenner did not flee, she did not leave the scene, and she spoke with law enforcement and complied with all requests. The phrase hit and run persists largely because of misunderstanding and because of the emotional weight of the fatal outcome. Sheriff's investigators forwarded the case to prosecutors with a recommendation to consider vehicular manslaughter, but prosecutors declined. Why? Because under California law, they would need to prove criminal negligence, not just poor judgment. That meant proving Jenner acted with reckless disregard for human life, not simply that she made a mistake. They concluded they could not meet that standard beyond a reasonable doubt. While no criminal charges were filed, civil court was another story. Multiple lawsuits were filed against Jenner by victims and family members. These suits alleged negligence and wrongful death. Over time, though, most were either dismissed or settled privately with no admission of wrongdoing. The media response was immediate and polarized. Some outlets emphasized Jenner's celebrity status, while others focused on the fatality. After Jenner's transition later that year, the crash became further entangled in cultural and political debates. Criticism, misinformation, and conspiracy theories spread rapidly online. One woman lost her life, several others were injured, and a famous figure walked away physically unharmed, but permanently associated with tragedy. The crash was ruled an accident, but accidents still have consequences. This was not a hit and run, not a criminal act, but it was not insignificant. The Caitlyn Jenner crash is a reminder that everyday actions, even routine drives, can have irreversible consequences. And sometimes, the truth is far more complex than the headlines suggest. There are criminal cases, and then there are cases that reshape history. The O.J. Simpson case wasn't just a murder trial. It was a collision between celebrity and justice, between race and policing, and between evidence and persuasion. Nearly 30 years later, it is still studied in law schools, debated in living rooms, and referenced whenever justice appears to fail or succeed, depending on who you ask. This is the complete story. Orenthal James Simpson was born July 9th, 1947 in San Francisco. He grew up poor. His father left early, and he battled rickets as a child, requiring leg braces. Football became his only escape. At USC, Simpson became a phenomenon, winning the Heisman Trophy in 1968. In the NFL, he made history becoming the first player to rush over 2,000 yards in a 14-game season. And by the 1980s, OJ was everywhere. Hertz commercials, Hollywood films, sports commentary. He was marketed as safe, friendly, non-threatening, a black celebrity widely embraced by white America. OJ met Nicole Brown in 1977. She was just 18, he was 30. She worked as a waitress. They married in 1985, but behind closed doors, their relationship was violent. Police responded to at least 8 domestic violence calls, the most disturbing being in 1989 when Nicole was found bruised, beaten, and crying, documented by police photographs. OJ pleaded no contest, and friends later described Nicole as living in fear. She told people, quote, "He's going to kill me." Sunday night, Brentwood, an upscale neighborhood. Nicole had attended her daughter's dance recital earlier that day. Ron Goldman, a waiter and a friend, stopped by later to return a pair of glasses Nicole's mother had left at the restaurant. Sometime between 10:15 and 10:30, both were attacked brutally. The injuries were savage. Nicole's throat had been slashed nearly to decapitation. Ron had defensive wounds, stab wounds, and a clear sign of a struggle. The killer used extreme force. This was not a robbery. This was personal. The crime scene was chaotic. Blood everywhere. Footprints, drops, smears. But mistakes were made immediately. Officers walked through the blood. Evidence was not sealed properly, and detectives failed to secure Simpson's estate promptly. These errors would later become critical. OJ had no alibi for the exact time of the murders. Blood matching Nicole and Ron were found in his Bronco. Blood matching Simpson was found at the crime scene. A matching glove was discovered at his home, and the timeline placed him dangerously close. On June 17, 1994, OJ was supposed to surrender, but he didn't. Instead, America watched live as a white Ford Bronco crawled through Los Angeles traffic. Inside the car, O.J. Simpson, reportedly having thoughts about taking his own life. A gun, a disguise, family photos, cash, 95 million viewers. This was not just news. It was a national event. O.J. was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He pleaded not guilty. The stage was set for the most televised trial in history. But then, the defense assembled a legal super team. Johnny Coran, master orator; Robert Shapiro, strategist; F. Lee Bailey, cross-examination expert; and Alan Dershowitz, appellate authority. The prosecution, Marcia Clark and Christopher Darden, under relentless pressure. DNA evidence should have just ended the case, but the science was new to the juries, and the defense attacked chain of custody. They argued contamination, they questioned lab integrity, and they reframed certainty as doubt. Detective Mark Furman became the trial's breaking point. Tapes revealed him using racial slurs. He denied planting evidence, but his credibility was destroyed. The defense reframed the case as racism versus justice. Then, in court, when OJ tried on the gloves, they didn't fit. In reality, they were shrunken, blood-soaked, and worn over latex gloves, but perception mattered more than explanation. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit. October 3rd, 1995. The verdict? Not guilty. Celebration in some communities, devastation in others. The nation watched, divided. In 1997, a civil jury found O.J. Simpson liable. Wrongful death, a $33.5 million judgment, and a legal acknowledgement of responsibility. In 2007, Simpson published If I Did It, a hypothetical confession, but many saw it as chilling. Later, in 2007, Simpson committed armed robbery. He was convicted, sentenced up to 33 years, but was paroled in 2017. He was criminally acquitted, but civilly liable. In the public opinion, he was found largely guilty. This case remains a masterclass in courtroom strategy. The OJ trial changed everything. How police handle evidence, how juries view DNA, and how media shapes justice. It was never just a trial. It was America on trial. Hey guys, just wanted to share a quick word for this case in specific. I want to tell you guys, I am actually a student in criminal justice, so I've been learning a lot more about the justice system and everything to do with that. And I'd like to say, OJ is a prime example of the top of the criminal justice wedding cake, which I'll put an image here. But the wedding cake is basically the top tier of it is the worst one, known as celebrated cases, which is like very, very prolific criminals or like celebrities that got in trouble. It's like things a lot of people know, like the most known cases that it gets the most media attention. And then the bottom being misdemeanors, like, hey, you didn't pay your parking ticket. Hey, you didn't show up to court, so you're in trouble now. Like it's not as bad. But I just wanted to share that point. OJ is a prime example at the top. He is a very like he's a celebrity, very well known person, and he committed horrible acts on two innocent people. But my next point, in criminal court, he was found not guilty. I'd say if it was 10 years later, he would have been found guilty. DNA evidence was very new at the time, so they didn't trust it. So he got off scot-free in a criminal court. But the civil court, which is more like, hey, me and you, it's like your everyday person. Um, they it's more like they go to court. You're not gonna go to jail, but they know you did it. Like in the script, I even wrote down, it was an acknowledgement. He had to pay like $22.5 million to families and people because like they're like, we know you killed him. We know you're guilty. We know you have to pay for your crimes. So he had to pay in the sense of he had to pay money, but he somehow got off scot-free in criminal court. So he never went to jail. But later he committed armed robbery and went to jail. Just wanted to tell you guys a few things. Some stuff to share with this case. I really appreciate you guys. I hope you're enjoying the video, and I hope you continue to enjoy the video. Thank you for letting me yap, and let's get on to the next case. Thank you guys so much, and enjoy. On the night of March 1st, 1932, the child of America's greatest hero vanished from his crib. The crime shocked the nation. The investigation captivated the world, and the trial would redefine American law enforcement forever. This was not just a kidnapping, it was the Lindbergh kidnapping, the crime of the century. To understand the impact of this crime, you must understand who Charles Lindbergh was. In 1927, Lindbergh became the first person to fly solo, non-stop across the Atlantic. Overnight, he became the most famous man on Earth. He represented courage, innovation, and American exceptionalism. When Lindbergh married Anne Morrow, the couple became global celebrities. When their son, Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., was born in 1930, he was nicknamed the Eagle's Child. The baby was guarded, cherished, and unknowingly a target. The Lindberghs lived in a secluded estate near Hopewell, New Jersey. The house sat on a hill surrounded by woods. It was meant to be safe, private, remote. That isolation would later prove fatal. Tuesday, March 1st, 1932. It was cold, rainy, and windy. The Lindbergh baby had a cold and was put to bed early, around 7:30 p.m. At approximately 9 p.m., the family heard a noise, a sound like a crate falling. No one investigated. At 10 p.m., the nurse went to check on the baby. The crib was empty. Panic erupted. A frantic search of the house followed. Then, outside the nursery window, a crude homemade ladder broken into sections. And on the windowsill, a ransom note. The note demanded $50,000. It was riddled with spelling errors. It was signed with a strange symbol, 2 overlapping circles and 3 holes. The message warned the family not to involve police. They did immediately. The kidnapping became international news. Police were overwhelmed. Thousands of tips flooded in. Fake ransom notes arrived daily. Even Al Capone offered help from prison. The Lindberghs were drowning in attention and desperation. A retired school principal named Dr. John Condon inserted himself into the case. He wrote a letter to the press offering to act as a mediator. Shockingly, the kidnappers responded. He became known as Jafsi. Condon met a mysterious man in a Bronx cemetery. The man called himself John. He spoke with a German accent, and he claimed the baby was alive, but he demanded the ransom. On April 2nd, 1932, $50,000 in gold certificates was paid. These bills were carefully recorded. In exchange, the kidnappers promised the baby's return, but they lied. On May 12, 1932, a truck driver discovered a small body in the woods, less than 5 miles from the Lindbergh home. It was Charles Lindbergh, Jr. The child had been dead for weeks. The cause? A fractured skull. The kidnapping was now a murder. The latter became crucial evidence. Experts believed it was homemade, a single craftsman, a mistake that would haunt the killer. Gold certificates were being phased out. Banks were being alerted. But then 2 years later, a gas station attendant noticed a suspicious bill. He wrote down the license plate. The suspect was Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a German immigrant and a carpenter. Police found over $14,000 of ransom money in his garage. He denied everything. The trial began in 1935. The courtroom was a circus. Evidence included handwriting analysis, ladder wood matches, and witness testimony. Hauptmann claimed the money was left by a dead friend. The jury didn't believe it. Hauptmann was found guilty. He was sentenced to death, and on April 3rd, 1936, he was executed in the electric chair. He maintained his innocence to the end. Even today, doubts remain. Evidence was contaminated, witnesses were coerced, and the media was pressurizing the whole investigation. There was also the thought that he had possible accomplices. Some historians believe Hauptmann was guilty, and others believe he was just a scapegoat. The Lindbergh kidnapping changed America. It led to the Federal Kidnapping Act, making kidnapping a federal crime. It reshaped law enforcement forever. This wasn't just the death of a child. It was the death of innocence. The Lindbergh kidnapping marked the moment America realized that fame offers no protection. On May 25th, 2020, a cell phone camera captured 9 minutes and 29 seconds that would ignite the largest protest movement in American history. A man lay face down on the pavement, handcuffed, pleading for air. Standing over him was a Minneapolis police officer named Derek Michael Chauvin. By the time it was over, George Floyd was dead, and the world would never look at policing the same way again. Derek Michael Chauvin was born on March 19, 1936, in Oakdale, Minnesota. He grew up in a middle-class household. His parents later divorced. Chauvin joined the U.S. Army Reserve, serving primarily as a military police officer, though he never saw combat. After leaving the military, he pursued a career in law enforcement. In 2001, Chauvin joined the Minneapolis Police Department. Chauvin served as a Minneapolis police officer for nearly 19 years. He worked patrol, special units, and eventually even a field training officer responsible for teaching younger officers. But behind that badge, Chauvin had a troubling record. He accumulated 18 official complaints during his career. Most resulted in no discipline. Several involved allegations of excessive force. This pattern would later become central to public outrage. The incident began with a routine call. A store clerk accused George Floyd of attempting to pass a counterfeit $20 bill. Police were dispatched to Cup Foods in South Minneapolis. Officers Thomas Lane and J. Alexander Kwong arrived first. They encountered Floyd in his vehicle. Floyd was handcuffed without physical violence. But when officers attempted to place him in a squad car, Floyd panicked. He said he was claustrophobic, and he said he couldn't breathe. At this point, Chauvin arrived with Officer Tao Thao. They pulled Floyd from the car. Chauvin forced Floyd face down onto the street. He placed his knee on Floyd's neck. Floyd pleaded, quote, "I can't breathe." Bystanders begged officers to stop. An off-duty firefighter pleaded to check Floyd's pulse. Chauvin did not move. For over 9 minutes, Chauvin maintained pressure, even after Floyd lost consciousness, even after he had no pulse. Paramedics arrived. Floyd was pronounced dead shortly after. The official cause? Cardiopulmonary arrest due to law enforcement restraint. The word homicide appeared on the autopsy. The video went viral. Within hours, protests erupted. Within days, cities across the world were marching. Chauvin's name, synonymous with police brutality. 4 days later, Derek Chauvin was arrested. He was charged with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The other officers were also charged. The trial began in March 2021. The prosecution relied heavily on the video. They called police trainers who testified that Chauvin violated policy. Medical experts testified Floyd died from oxygen deprivation. The defense argued drugs and health issues. The jury watched the video repeatedly. On April 20th, 2021, the verdict was read. Guilty on all counts. The courtroom was silent. Outside, the world reacted. Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in Minnesota State Prison. The judge cited abuse of authority. Later, Chauvin pleaded guilty to federal civil rights violations. He was sentenced to 21 years in federal prison to run concurrently. In November 2023, Chauvin was stabbed in federal prison. He survived. The incident underscored the lasting danger surrounding his case. The Chauvin case changed policing. Knee restraints were banned, departments restructured, and body camera policies were expanded. Trust in police reached a new historic low. The other officers were convicted federally. Some received prison sentences. The idea of just following orders was rejected. Derek Chauvin will spend decades behind bars, but the consequences of his actions reach far beyond one man. George Floyd became a symbol, and the world was forced to watch. Hey guys, I just want to give you all a quick warning. This next case is very disturbing. I will say from here, all the cases are just gonna get worse and worse, but this one is especially hard. It is entire family that ends up dying, and it is really tragic, and it's just a horrible case. But yeah, I just want to give you guys a warning. If you're queasy, if you're anxious about that kind of stuff, I recommend tuning into the next video, because this is the last case for this video. But yeah, hope you guys can enjoy. Just relax and don't take this too personally, because this guy's a real piece of shit, and he's getting what he deserves, I promise you. In August of 2018, a quiet Colorado neighborhood watched a man stand in front of television cameras. He smiled. He pleaded for his missing family to come home. And all the while, he already knew exactly where they were. This is the story of Christopher Watts, and how a seemingly ordinary man murdered his pregnant wife and 2 daughters. Christopher Lee Watts was born on May 17, 1985, in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He grew up quiet and reserved, described as polite and emotionally flat. He had no criminal record, no known violence. He worked hard, rarely argued. People described him as boring and dependable. That reputation would later become part of the horror. Christopher met Shannon Rozek in 2010. She was outgoing, ambitious, social, the opposite of Chris. They married in 2012. Shannon documented their life extensively on social media. They had two daughters, Bella in 2013 and Celeste, also known as Cece, in 2015. From the outside, the Watts family looked perfect. But behind the scenes, the marriage was under intense strain. They filed for bankruptcy in 2015. They lived far beyond their means. Shannon controlled finances and household decisions. Chris retreated inward. He avoided conflict until avoidance turned into resentment. In 2018, everything changed. Chris began an affair with a coworker, Nicole Kessinger. With her, he reinvented himself. He lied about his marriage. He told her he was separated, and he fantasized about a life without responsibilities, without kids, without Shannon. In June 2018, Shannon announced she was pregnant. The baby would be named Nico. Chris did not want this child. He emotionally withdrew. Text messages show Shannon desperate to save the marriage. Chris was already planning an exit. On August 12th, Shannon returned home from a business trip at 1:48 a.m. Chris was waiting. What happened next would later change repeatedly in Chris's own confessions. He would eventually admit to killing Shannon in their bed. She was 15 weeks pregnant. She fought back. After killing Shannon, Chris loaded her body into his truck. His daughters were still alive. He drove them to an oil site owned by his employer. At the site, he smothered Celeste. Bella watched. She asked, "Is the same thing going to happen to me?" He then killed Bella next. He placed their bodies inside oil tanks. Shannon's body was buried in a shallow grave near the tanks. Chris returned home and went to work as if nothing happened. He texted Shannon's phone. He contacted a realtor. He searched lyrics to love songs. Later that day, Shannon's friend Nicole Atkinson became concerned. She called police. When officers arrived, Chris acted calm. Too calm. He gave interviews begging for their return. Viewers immediately sensed something was wrong. Police body cam footage captured Chris unraveling in real time. He felt basic emotional responses. He contradicted himself. He volunteered information no one asked for. Detectives grew suspicious quickly. Chris was interviewed for hours. He failed a polygraph. He broke down. In his first confession, blamed Shannon. He claimed she killed the girls and he killed her in a rage. This was a lie. Months later, Chris confessed again, this time telling the truth. He admitted to killing everyone. He described details no one else knew. The motive was simple, but horrifying. He wanted a new life. Chris Watts was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with the deceased human body. He pleaded guilty to avoid the death penalty, and on November 19, 2018, Chris Watts was sentenced to 5 life sentences without parole, plus 84 additional years. Shannon's family addressed him directly. The courtroom was silent. From prison, Watts gave interviews. He discussed religion. He showed little remorse. He received fan mail. The public reaction was disgust and disbelief. Chris Watts did not fit the stereotype. No history of rage, no substance abuse, no outward warning signs. Experts describe him as emotionally detached, conflict avoidant, and narcissistic, a man who chose annihilation over confrontation. This case is so chilling because of how ordinary it feels. A quiet man, a suburban home, a smiling face, no monsters under the bed, just one standing in the kitchen. Christopher Watts will never get out of prison, but his case remains a warning. Evil doesn't always scream. Sometimes it smiles into a camera and asks for sympathy.